Protagoras once said, "Man is the measure of all things." This has become the ontological anthem of modern science, which designates the human as both progenitor of all consciousness and the apex of evolution. Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am," and the whole world believes him. Modern science occupies a wide array of fields and subfields of study and research, so there are many angles to approach this. The basis of science is foundationally built off the cornerstone called logic. So I will start with this. Logic has become quite the term to use in modern times, though its understanding has been conflated to presume that which is logical is true, factual, or correct. Logic is a structure or arrangement of words or reasonings, of which must exist within the framework of a linguistic system. What you think and how you think is dictated by your various languages, including verbal, written, symbolic, and body languages, to name a few. Because the mind requires language for thought, the logic function of your mentality is reliant on your own imagination, the logos you have structured. Humans have two primary functions of thought, logics and ethics. Logic is the arrangement or ordering of a system, while ethics is the judgment process of the thoughts. An unchanging truth, logic is not. To understand a proper logic system, we can use the I Ching or the Book of Changes. The I Ching is a logic system with no defined meaning. It describes the flow of all things in the universe in a binary system of 64. Logic is an ever-changing system, one that is cyclical. What words you use to define the logic system as descriptions alter the fabric of interpretation as they change. To better understand this, we can look at DNA, a binary system of 64, the same as the I Ching. Arranging the DNA codons in the same order does not produce the same results in the same way. For example, it is said humans and bananas share around 50% of DNA. Most of this is expressed in cellular functions, which are fairly universal for the replication and division of cells of most organisms. This alone reveals how there can be distinct differences using the same logic algorithm of DNA. You can take this further with pigs, which are said to share closer to 98% DNA with humans. It's so close that many organs are compatible from pig to human and vice versa. The bodies of a pig and human are different in many ways, despite the similarity in the logic system of the DNA encoding the two species. What I am conveying is that the interpretation of the same logic is dynamic and ever-changing. A only equals A as a consequence of an equation in which it equals A. It's observable only after the conclusion. What this looks like in probability and statistics is that these methods of determination are inherently reliant on the ignorance of the process. Flipping a coin is the most common example for explaining probability, in which a coin flip has a 50-50 chance of landing on either heads or tails. The probability is only seen as random with a lack of information. The coin will either land on heads or tails based on the factors of the toss. One can toss a coin to receive a desired outcome. There's not a random chance, merely the ignorance of the factors. The counter-argument is that probability is only supposed to be useful with the lack of full information in providing context clues towards the possible results. In this case, the observer is encouraged to trust the logic behind the possibilities. The logic of probability is never consistent, as it considers and compounds previous data as a factor in the future. A coin tossed 10 times should have the same probability of landing heads 10 times in a row as it does being tossed 100 times and landing on heads 100 times in a row. Probability theory dictates the reduced possibility of an outcome based on the unlikelihood of so many coin tosses in a row landing the same result. Probability is inherently trying to be divinatory, which once again the I Ching is a much better model for that endeavor. Statistics is an inferential science based on the collection and analyzing of numerical data, often in the context of establishing trends, probabilities, and measuring variability. Statistics is core to much scientific and social research, which proposes a consensus of an isolated parcel of information that can be extrapolated or interpreted for an agenda. Statistics exist only to reduce the understanding of the subject matter. Much like probability, it works best with the lack of data, therefore making any analysis falsely verified. Before moving on, I want to dispute logical fallacies, as they are the most intellectually dishonest argumentation devices. The purpose of a logical fallacy is to throw preconceived counterpoints. The idea of a logical fallacy is that you don't have to listen to what someone believes on the basis you don't agree with their conclusion or methods of interpretation. The moment you claim someone is using a logical fallacy, you have immediately closed off your mind and nullified any further discourse because your apparent reasoning is superior to the person using a logical fallacy. As I've pointed out, the logic function does not work like that. No one kills an argument faster than someone claiming their opposition is using a logical fallacy in a dialogue. This naturally brings us to the mechanistic worldview of modern science and logic or reasoning-based scholars. The idea of mechanism is that everything is equatable to machines with no intrinsic relationship to one another. The universe is a logic machine, animals are driven by mechanistic instincts, reality is a construct of a robotic process of which its parts can be determined through their mechanisms of operation. It goes in line with determinism and the philosophy that all life and humans are constructed of their chemical and mechanical functions. Most people have not been told you do not have to buy into the cult of science. Science claims humans trend away from primitive beliefs to the elucidation of logic and reason. But let's look into the history and application of modern science. What kind of a world has been birthed from science? Modern science is the snobby brainchild of alchemy and the Christian churches. Many of the most significant contributors to what we called modern science were in fact alchemists. The likes of Isaac Newton, Galileo, Paracelsus, Roger Bacon, John Dee, Jabir, Jacob Boehme, Al-Razi, Andreas Libavius, Hildegard, and many more who paved the way for modern sciences, such as chemistry and astronomy, medicine, and mathematics. Many of these people had to operate within the strictures of the church authorities, often encoding their work in the colorful alchemical language we associate with them. Some, like Galileo, were outright persecuted, and others, like Hildegard, were simply given to the church from a young age, and so only operated in context of church dogma. Working outside of the church codexes for any alchemical pursuit could lead to arrest, persecution, and death. The Dark Ages were dark because of the suppression of reading and the oppression of the pursuit of alchemy. However, the church only disliked alchemy on the basis that its people would not have to be constrained to the power dynamic the church wielded. The church is what built and funded scientific research in Europe from the medieval times up through the Renaissance. It was the church that pushed the idea that alchemy was a charlatan's game of turning base metals into gold, something it was extremely interested in doing itself secretly, at the same time as gold was the currency of religion and therefore power. These universities quickly became fraternal societies, and thus science became an elitist pursuit, and still to this day that is the case. One cannot dispute science without losing all credibility, as the logic system is self-reassuring. Obviously, science has had quite the split from the church by this point. Science has changed its terminology, but is still an offshoot of classic medieval Christian dogma. It is a power-hungry, money-making business that sells theories instead of indulgences. It believes in one God, which is the concept of its inherent and self-purported value of truth and reason. Let's take a look at what modern science has been up to. Most recently is the COVID pandemic, in which the prayer, "Trust the science," was chanted to non-believers. Trust is a synonym of faith, of course. What is the science, and is it worth trusting? Pretty fundamental to our lives is our immediate ecosystem and dietary intake, such as food and water. Bayer is a chemical company that recently bought and merged with Monsanto. Bayer is most famous for making aspirin and other pharmaceutical drugs. It is a behemoth in the drugs and pesticide businesses. They even helped create the gas used for the concentration camp chambers. Monsanto produces chemicals and pesticides as well, though their focus was more agricultural and would create Roundup, the weed killer, and were the first to genetically modify plant cells and bought out other seed companies and expanded their list of genetically modified seeds, since they need to use plants modified to survive their Roundup. Monsanto produced the key ingredient used in Agent Orange during the Vietnam War. Bayer and Monsanto are a match made in heaven. By controlling seed, plants, and weeds, they are eliminating biodiversity, modifying crops to make them unsuited for human consumption, and removing plants with natural cures to the ailments they sell medication for. All of this backed by vigorous agenda-based scientific research. Science continually is lobbied to allow for preservatives, pesticides, petroleum-based food colorants such as Red 40, high-fructose corn syrup, fast food, and over-the-counter prescription drugs to be fed to humans. Meanwhile, herbal teas are given warning labels, yet soda is not. Companies like Coca-Cola are backed by scientific research which supports that 30 minutes of exercise a day does more good for your health than not consuming their poisonous soft drinks, which also wastes hundreds of billions of liters of water yearly. Anything can be FDA or CDC scientifically approved with enough money. Industries like dentistry and pharmaceuticals only exist as remedies to the toxic, nutrient-draining diets of modern scientific-backed lifestyles. You can check your municipality's tap water and see what kind of chemicals, pollutants, and toxins exist in the drinking water that are illegally allowed to be included, the health detriments of which are ignored. Then there is the bleaching of water to clean it and the addition of fluoride to prevent tooth decay. Universities have reduced the amount of education they give doctors on nutrition. Most are incompetent at passing basic nutritional tests. Instead, they are there to learn the multi-trillion-dollar pharmaceutical companies' legal drug trade. These large companies, like Pfizer, regularly get into huge criminal lawsuits where they owe millions and sometimes billions of dollars, pocket change to them. Nothing is done but a slap on the wrist and a be more subtle about it next time admonition. These companies are partners with the giant agricultural landowners, and so the supposed cures to the poison food given to us is backed by scientific research. This same science lies about its own damage to the environment and Earth. Meat and crop farms are rendering land unusable, and for livestock they are fed improper GMO foods for their diet, kept in hellish conditions, and when slaughtered, they have to be x-rayed for metals like nails. Purposeful toxic spills, discarding plastics and other wastes into the oceans or landfills, deforestation, inability to recycle most materials, detonating over 2,000 nukes in the atmosphere and underground, and an inordinate amount of sewage dumped into freshwater lakes and rivers and oceans. But science will blame you and your waste and gas stoves for global warming, and not itself or petroleum companies that lobby the use of plastic in all things to sustain their barony. To go against the narrative of science is to spread misinformation, a classic symptom of cult mentality. The primary antagonists of human health are fungal diseases such as candida and black mold, to name the most common ones, as well as parasitic worms. Humans are supposed to deworm regularly, at least every 6 months to a year, and detox from fungal infections. Micrometals and plastics get broken down by fungi such as candida and converted into nanoparticles. These particles can then pass through any barrier of the body and provide a base of operations for the fungus to spread. Worms can be found in the tap water, produce, meat, soil, and anywhere waste or food is not properly cared for and cleaned. Our water mains are cleaned with bleach and chlorine, both of which parasitic eggs can survive in. The meat industry permits animals to spend their whole lives knee-deep in their own waste, spreading worms to an already poor dietary choice. How we treat animals and nature is a reflection of science, which views only human life as important and that all things should exist for the benefit of humans. This concept of science is the rhetoric behind some of the worst atrocities in human history, such as the elimination of native populations and the enslavement of humans. The scientific studies on such groups of people found them to be primitive savages and therefore were lesser beings, justifying the treatment of them to the level of animals. And you can see how we treat animals. The universe is alive and the earth has a soul. Animism is our natural belief. Kids are born as animists who do not differentiate organic and inorganic life. A toy is as alive to them as their pets or parents. Crushing a spider, mistreating a rock, and killing a human bear the same severity of action. The lack of animism leads to the aforementioned mistreatment of humans and nature alike, since it's all considered mechanical anyway by modern science. Tooth decay is caused by fungus, not the lack of fluoridation. All health problems can be related to the microbial or parasitic. Mainly, this occurs in the gut, where the highest density of microbes exists in us. We are the collection of microbes in us. Parasites and pathogenic microorganisms cause damage to the body and mind. Everything from acne to cancer, dementia to autism, gastrointestinal issues, and heart disease and genetic problems are the results of microbes and the damage they do. Nothing gets sick because of probability. An infection is microbes attacking your body. Diets lead to the success of either your good or bad microbiome, depending on what that diet consists of. In the same way, trees are immortal and do not die of old age, but die only through the infection of fungus if not directly destroyed by some other catastrophe, of course. Humans die because of microorganisms, not vague ideas of symptoms, as Western medicine suggests. Because our health and the very ego or self is determined by the microbiome, the introduction of worms and pathogenic and opportunistic fungi alter behavior and cognitive functions through the release of toxins that can affect the nerves. Even if they do not reach the brain, the body is connected as a system, and especially the gut, which does contain enough nerves to be a brain in its own right. Most fungi can hack the host through the bones or muscles anyway. Parasites and fungi change taste, moods, behaviors, attention spans, cravings, and any appetite of human behavior and cognitive ability. Since we are the collection of whatever microbes consist of our personal ecosystems. Science stopped pushing deworming decades ago. They banned borax instead of Blue 1. Herbs are replaced by pharmaceuticals, which require the same herbs humans have revered and used for thousands of years. Only these pharmaceuticals isolate certain chemicals, add toxins, and eliminate the ability of the plant to destroy the necessary microbes that give it its medicinal properties in the first place. Modern scientific medicine is built on lies, and the only bit of alchemy they do now is the conversion of your health problems into gold. Real alchemy is applied animism, sometimes called lower astrology. It is the practice of using the learned behaviors of the universe and nature to transmute material and create healing. Science is not required to understand these learned behaviors of the universe. Science did not discover the boiling point of water. It merely observed the behavior of water and heat together. What I mean is the world can be understood through alchemy and animism rather than science, simply because science is an interpretation of the world, not a fact producing truth of it. Its explanations are in its own terms, and its logic is always backed by itself. And then there is the quantum mechanics, string, relativity theories, your Einsteins, Carl Sagans, and Neil deGrasse Tysons of the world. The whole division of science which mythologizes itself in creating its own lore and superpowers. Time travel, chaos theory, God particles, dark matter, the Big Bang, parallel realities. This is what science likes to pursue, and it needs sci-fi and fantasy to push it as an authentic theory. It mocks ancient religion, mythology, and alchemy, which correctly identified the astromicrobial connections of the cosmos, misunderstood today as spirits, soul, magic, the paranormal and metaphysical, or otherwise practices labeled as pseudoscience. Yet these beliefs are describing the microbial in every instance, of which all things are composed of. The somatic patterns of the planetary orbits and constellations impress their shape on microorganisms. The stars are blueprints of the microbial, and the gods are personifications of these primarily fungal forces. I think I will end the video here, though by no means could I cover everything. I encourage you to check out my channel if you are interested in learning more about mythology, fungus, and animism. Thanks for watching.